Hello, everybody. My name's Gideon Rauchi, and here are some friends of mine. Can you guys introduce yourselves?
My name's Mira.
And I'm Misha.
So we're second generation who were actually born and raised in the Unification Church, and currently now we're the ones who are supporters of Sanctuary Church, hence the gun cult, right? So actually we're going to do a response on this lovely lady who's actually a peer of ours, right? She's second gen, named Hana, who was on Apologia Studios, and she was interviewed by a group of pastors under their show called Cultish. So there's some things that she said, we want to respond to it, and we all kind of feel differently about this. It's not, it's we each have a unique feeling about this. So we're gonna have fun, and there might be some things we agree with her on. There might be some misunderstandings, heavy incorrections. So let's start off with the video.
Sounds good.
You had talked about how you had grown up in the Unification Church, aka the Moonies, and they are one of those cults. It's featured in Walter Martin's Kingdom of the Cults. It's something that he addressed during his time. It's a cult in the when did it kind of come to fruition? Because this clip that we played introducing this podcast, this is an interview from 1974, and you can tell it's like very old school. It's not, you wouldn't see an interview like this today. The interview guy has a cigarette in his hand, and it's just very old school interview.
Let's talk about Al Cap.
But so you grew up in the Unification Church, and you're here to talk to us about that. And so I think what would be good is maybe just tell them a little bit about yourself, and maybe start explaining too, because I think people need to understand the context of who Sun Myung Moon was, kind of what the theology is, and in relation to, they're kind of known for their mass marriages. It's kind of like that's one thing that really defines them. What it's like to have children, the aspect of having children, those different aspects, what they believe about God, what they believe about Jesus, what they believe about salvation, because that sort of sets the foundation for really how you operated as someone who kind of grew up in the Moonies. So let's start with this. Reverend Sun Myung Moon, how did it...
Okay.
It's Sun Myung Moon!
Okay, just first off, there's an M in his middle name. It's Sun Myung Moon. Not Sun Young, Sun Myung. That's just...
I know it's tough to pronounce, but...
It's tricky to pronounce, just... There's an M.
We don't mean to be nitpicky, by the way. This is just fun.
It's just
Usually
a slight...
people have it mistaken, and it's more funny. Yeah.
Start. What's the initial origin story of the Unification Church?
Yeah, so Reverend Sun Myung Moon, he was born, I believe it was in the 1920 in North Korea, and he's self-proclaimed second, he proclaims himself as the second coming, the second Messiah. And yeah, the Moonies, they're known for their mass marriages. One of the biggest things that they really focus on is the blood lineage. So their whole idea of what the fall is totally anti-Christian. And we can maybe go into that, into depth more, but the marriages focus around creating a pure blood lineage. So Moon proclaimed himself as being sinless, and thereby having all these mass marriages, from those marriages would produce sinless children. So my parents were the first generation that kind of joined, and I would say it really blew up in America, around the...
Okay, I'm sorry. So this is a big theme, and this is a thing she talks about a lot that I think she misrepresents. So she says that the idea is to have sinless children. Now the point of the blessing ceremony, which is she's referring to the mass weddings, we call it the blessing ceremony, is what we call the marriage ceremony. The point of it is to remove original sin.
Right.
Okay, that's the one of the core points of receiving the blessing from the Messiah is the removal of original sin passed down from Adam and Eve. But the point is not to keep saying, oh, they just make sinless children, and then they point to the fact that they're obviously not sinless, and the families are obviously not sinless, and they use this as a point of attack in this show repeatedly.
Right.
But that's not the point. The point isn't we're going to have perfect people right away or sinless perfect children right away. she's kind of mischaracterizing. So we'll get more into that later. I think
she corrects them later on, but still the misconception of like sinless. Yeah. Anyway,
she'll talk about more. We'll respond more. But I just wanted to touch on that.
Right.
The 70s, 80s. I'm not too good with dates, but and I was born 92, so I was considered second generation. They would call everyone who was born from these mass marriages were second generation. They would call us blessed children. We were born without the original sin,
Right.
from the fall. So that basically, is that we're told that we were no longer part of Satan's lineage. We were pure, right? That's kind of I don't know if that clarifies some things of like how I was raised. So it was this weird dichotomy of like feeling very special, but then never really being good enough. Very, very works based.
How did your parents?
Feeling very special, yet not good enough. What did Jesus say when someone said, "Hey, you're good, right? You're good," and Jesus said, Well, who's good? Only the Father's good, right? Jesus always had this attitude of, I have to do better, even though he is perfect. Everyone could agree, but Jesus still had that attitude. So there's going to be more things on here where it's like, well, yeah, that says that in the Bible, but it somehow is twisted to think that we're odd. Anyway.
Parents get into it?
So my dad's actually from Austria, and my mother's American, and they were in an arranged marriage in New York. So I don't know if you researched some of the stuff, but one of their biggest mass marriages was, I think, at 82 in Madison Square Garden in New York. And they're very big about cross-cultural marriages, and also like uniting all world religions, which we can definitely get into too, because the Bible goes into that.
Yeah. So one of the things too is, so when you talked about the going back to like how things originated, so Sun Young Moon, he initially, like Walter Marr was kind of making a comparison in Kingdom of the Cults of him to Joseph Smith.
Right.
So apparently he had a point where he claims to have had sort of a private revelation or an encounter with Jesus, and this is sort of where he got
at age 16.
At age 16, and this was where he realized that he was the second. He was sort of the Messiah of the Messiah.
Well, what he claims is that when he was 16, so just kind of backtrack, he grew up, his parents were actually, I think Taoists, and they were like kind of poor farmers. He grew up that, and then they converted, I think 1930 to the Presbyterian Church. But he received some revelation at age 16 on a mountaintop on Easter Sunday.
Jesus came down to him and basically was asking him to fulfill his mission.
Quick correction, he was not raised Taoist at all. He was raised Confucius. It's Confucianism, not Taoist.
But then his parents did convert at some point, right?
Well, that's right. They eventually converted to Christianity, specifically Presbyterian Christianity. Yeah.
So that's what their whole doctrine is based off of, is that Jesus did not fulfill his mission. He only was able to bring salvation spiritually, and that Reverend Moon had to complete his mission.
Right. Now, when you say, I'll jump in here too in a second too, Andrew. But so we want to make sure we define terms, because a lot of times what cults will do is that they'll use language kind of the same way how Mormons will say how we need to return to our Heavenly Father. Right. And while in many ways you could sort of use that terminology to explain Orthodox Christianity, they mean fundamentally different things. So there's always a language barrier when it comes to the cults. So when they talk about Jesus' mission, from a Christian perspective, from a biblical perspective, you're thinking about Jesus Christ coming to live a perfect life, to live the perfect life that we could never live, and to be the perfect sacrifice so we could have our sin exchanged for his righteousness by faith in him. Like fundamental Orthodox Christianity. But what he taught, and you can explain this to us, is that it wasn't, Jesus' purpose wasn't just to die for the sins of the world, it was to get married.
Yes. Yeah, and that's where they take things out of context, especially when they say, like, when the Bible refers to the bride of Jesus, which is the church, but they take that literally as in Jesus was supposed to have a literal biological wife. And so they believe that Jesus was supposed to come and that his disciples were supposed to find him a bride. He was supposed to get married and have children and create a pure blood lineage. But because of the lack of faith of his disciples, or whatever happened, that he had to go the way of the cross, that was not God's intention. Basically, he wasn't able to fulfill his mission. Thereby, Moon saying, I need to fulfill the mission, have a family. So.
The other thing she brought up was the bride, right? So what's very common in nowadays theology of Christianity is that the bride represents everybody, which isn't wrong. I don't think it's not wrong.
Or that it represents the church.
It represents the church, right? It's not wrong. But the thing is, just like what Jesus said in the Lord's Prayer, as, the kingdom of heaven, right, as on earth, right? Things are made physical. Things have to be made physical. So, like, I have here pulled down in Romans chapter 8, verse 23, and not only they, but ourselves also have the first fruits of the Spirit when we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our bodies, right? So, so what she said that, Jesus only did spiritual salvation, that's true. Because when he comes back, he's supposed to redeem not just the spirit now it's everyone's bodies. But now it's made physical. Things are made physical. So having a bride, how do you redeem the body? How do you do that? Well,
and also they treat the idea of Jesus, like his mission being incomplete, as like a joke. Like something to point out is they keep laughing during this video,
right?
And I just want to point out that they're talking about someone else's beliefs, and they're talking about them as a joke and laughing at them.
Sure.
And these guys, they come across as chill dudes. They don't seem like, they're trying to be assholes, but it's just that it's a little bit rude to talk about someone's sincere beliefs and then laugh at the idea that they have. It's not really kosher. But anyways, that aside,
I mean, that's where it gets personal.
Right. So I just wanted to.
I'm sure they wouldn't.
I just wanted to bring that up.
Sure.
It's probably because they don't personally know us that they do this. But the point I wanted to make was they talk about Jesus not fully fulfilling his mission, and they act like that's an absurd idea. Then the question is, then why does he have to return again?
Sure.
Jesus literally said, I'm going to come again. If his mission was complete, why does he have to come again?
Right.
Also, if the mission of the Messiah was complete, then why do we still have hell on earth? We don't have heaven on earth. We don't have God's kingdom. We have hell on earth. If the Jesus
that's
mission,
the expectation of the Israelites back then, when the Messiah comes.
That's what they were expecting. Because
Right.
that's what the Old Testament prophesied.
Right. Exactly.
And so the idea that the idea that the Messiah is supposed to come and not be killed is like, oh, that's like a joke. Like that's
that wasn't thought
to
of.
me. That doesn't make any sense. Right. In the Bible, I know with their type of Christianity, they believe that obviously Jesus came to die. In the Bible, it says that they killed him because they did not know who he was.
Yeah, let me read that.
Yeah,
let me
go
read
ahead.
that. That's in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 8. It says, which none of the princes of this world knew, for had they known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. They
Exactly.
would not
Exactly.
have. So if they knew, in which we know in Deuteronomy, God has said, hey, Israelites, if you do this good thing, you get this reward. If you do this bad thing, you get this consequence. So, what did the Israelites do? They killed Jesus. What was the consequence? All of Israel after, within 70 years, they were overturned by Rome. Mm-hmm. So it's like, that's what you get for, killing the Messiah, God's son.
And what about the parable he gave? What about the landowner and the tenants?
Uh-huh.
Where
Exactly.
he has people renting land from him.
Right.
And then he sends his servants. This is a parable from Jesus.
Yes.
he sends his servants.
He's telling the Pharisees this.
And he said, if I send, a landowner sends his servants, they ask for the tax of the land or something like, or the land back. They kill him. The land renters kill him. Kill the servants.
Yes.
He keeps sending servant after servant. Finally, he's like, you know what? I will send my son because surely they will respect my son. And then they kill him too. And then Jesus asks him, okay, as that landowner, what do you think he's going to do to those renters of the land?
Yes.
How do you not connect what he's talking about there? The servants are the prophets that the Israelites kept killing. His son is Jesus. They kill him too. What happens? Israel's destroyed.
Right. And
does this make sense?
And on top of that, they answered, oh yeah, like he would give it to some other people. And then Jesus is like, well,
yeah, obviously.
God's gonna give it to the Gentiles,
right?
And which is funny when Jesus was saying that to those Pharisees, they were not making the connection, like, oh, he's talking about us.
It's really
so
surprising.
funny.
It's really surprising. There are many times when Jesus is telling a parable that to us it's a very obvious symbolism, and they're like, I don't get it. like, what are you talking about? But
oh man. Should we keep on going?
Let's go.
Awesome.
I'm going to hinge back real quick to the vision account, too. So they do claim, like Hana was saying, on Easter morning, but actually, so they say it was April 17th, 1936 was Easter morning. But if you actually just have a calculator, you can go back into calendars. Easter 17th, 1936 was a Friday, not a Sunday.
Let alone Easter Sunday.
Right. Let alone Easter Sunday.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Like, so
it's just not even.
It's like just going into it is really interesting, but also the parallels between.
Okay.
This is definitely very tricky.
So they really get a kick out of this. I looked into this. I don't know. So basically the criticism is, well, the church says that Easter in 1936 was April 17th, but it wasn't April 17th. It was the 21st. It was like, okay, that's a thing you can say, but I don't know where he gets that number from. It's not like it's official church platform. Father received, the Reverend Moon received the revelation from Jesus, April 17th. I don't know where he got that number from. In his autobiography, I looked, all he says is that it was the night before Easter in the year that he turned 16 is when he received this revelation from Jesus. That's all he says. He doesn't give it a date. He just says it was the night before Easter. The only place that I could actually find the number April 17th is in this book. It's by Michael Breen, and he got the number April 17th from someone named Onduk Moon, who I don't know who that is.
Okay.
I don't know who they heard it from. They're a secondary source. They weren't there. Obviously, it would be
Right.
Reverend Moon. Reverend Moon would be the one to get the date from, but it wasn't. He didn't say April 17th. It was some other guy. We don't know where they got the number from. Also, there's a lot of kind of room for confusion regarding this date because, one, Koreans do age differently, where they consider when you're born, you're one. And so when he says 16, it's not clear whether he meant Korean 16 or Western 16. And then also in Korea, they use the lunar calendar, not the solar. So there could be confusion there. Basically, there's a lot. We don't know who said April 17th or why. And even if they did, there's like room for confusion. So they act like it's just, obviously this revelation of Jesus didn't happen. It's like, it doesn't really hit as hard as they think it does.
They're just, even if they are true, the date's just like a couple days off.
Sure.
Like, someone could have gotten that wrong.
Nitpicking.
It's just nitpicking. What's important is
the revelation.
Yeah, did the revelation happen or not? It's
point.
not, did we get the date right in one book? It's like, did this happen? That's the bigger question. And I don't think you can use a little nitpicking about
when
who
was
said what
Jesus born, everybody?
Right.
Oh, if you don't know, then you're not saved. You're not a real Christian.
Jesus isn't real because we don't know when he was exactly born.
Right.
Like, that's the same standard. But anyways.
Okay. Keep on going.
Joseph Smith and Moon is the fact that the first vision, they don't really actually even know the real date it happened. So there's arguments between them, between him being the age 16 or the age 17. They've just given us a date now.
Okay,
Just
wait,
like,
no. It would either be age 15 or age 16.
Exactly, right.
So they're kind of messing it up because it might, I think it's 1935, which is when he turned 16 by Korean age.
Right,
So
right.
they're just mixing it up.
But also, he makes a comparison to Joseph Smith, which is like the second time now they made a comparison to Joseph Smith. Let's talk about Joseph Smith for a second, okay? Joseph Smith, this is the story, to my understanding, of the Mormon revelation. So we have fathers Reverend was visited by Jesus the night before Easter while he's praying on top of a mountain. That's the story. Joseph Smith's story is he's visited by the angel either Gabriel or Michael, and I may get some of these. I think I have most of this right. I may get some of the details wrong, but I think this is the gist of it.
Okay.
He's visited by an archangel.
Oh man, there's gonna be Mormons responding to this.
I'm sure there are.
There's
Mormons, if I get this wrong, be free to let me know. But this is my current understanding of their origin story. So Joseph Smith is visited by an angel. The angel leads him to some tablets, golden tablets. The golden tablets have this writing on them that's like ancient hieroglyphic, but it's like an alternate form of Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Something like that.
He can't read it. He needs a special like magnifying lens,
which he so happened to find,
which was with the tablets,
right?
That allows only him to read it.
Yeah.
And then he translated that into the Book of Mormon.
Right.
And then I learned this next part I learned from South Park, where this
they actually try to get their facts straight.
Yeah. where he wrote the book the first time, and then a lady took the book and hid it. And she said, okay, if these tablets that you talk about are real, you should be able to recreate this book exactly the same as you did the first time. Joseph Smith's reply was...
smart.
It was very smart.
Yeah.
Joseph Smith's reply was, well, I'm going to write I'm going to do it again. The words may not be exactly the same, but the same story is going to be mostly similar, which obviously shows that it's a story he made up. He can get most of it right, but he's not going to be able to replicate it word for word. So she proved her point.
Right.
And so... To equate that story with Reverend Moon's story, to me, is kind of ridiculous. It's like apples and oranges.
Right.
Yeah. They're like, they're just like Joseph Smith. No, it's not just like Joseph Smith.
Exactly. Yeah.
How we can see there's multiple first vision accounts with Joseph Smith. They just kind of agree upon one, but they don't actually have solid historical fact.
There are all these blurry...
Do you want video evidence of Jesus revealing himself on the mountain? What do you? They don't have facts. Where's the evidence that Jesus talked to him on the mountains? Like,
what? Wait, what's the evidence that you're a saved Christian? What is the?
Where's your historical facts?
I want to see the spiritual experience. I want to feel your heart. Can we put that can we do a scientific method out of that? Put that in a laboratory? Can we do that?
I'd like to introduce him to the concept of religion and having faith in something. Like, I'm sorry we don't have a hard facts to prove you that God exists and that Jesus was the Messiah and that Father met. Like, that's not how religion works. It's called life of faith. This is what religion is.
Facts that kind of shift over time depending on,
What's the shifting of facts?
Right. So really, so how does this affect you? Because we always talk about how theology affects people, or bad theology hurts people. So how from your vantage point then is that your parents would have been first generation. They actually participated in one of these marriage ceremonies with Sun Young Moon. And in fact, if you just look up Mooney's mass marriage on YouTube, you'll see tons of accounts for that. I think Vice has some documentaries, and it's been featured a whole bunch of different times. But so their idea was that you would create the second generation. They'd be known as you talk about this too, we know as the blessed children.
Right.
So it means that your parents would view you in a very unique way.
Yes.
And you probably have a unique view of yourself. I mean, you kind of told that, I'm assuming you probably grew up with friends that were not in your church.
Right.
And so it's like, how would you have the mindset as a child, being that you're this blessed child specifically chosen because your parents were in this marriage by the second Messiah, versus just your friend across the street.
Yeah, I mean...
Okay, wait.
Yeah.
When we were looking at this earlier, just objectively, his question is, if your parents were blessed in marriage by the second coming of Christ, how would you view yourself differently than someone who was just your friend across the street? I mean, don't you see, like, objectively that's... Yeah, you would kind of see yourself differently. Like, if it's true. But anyways, it just...
It's true. The point isn't to get on this high horse and think, oh, I'm holier than thou. Like, if you're looking at it as a way to be arrogant, that's not the point. But if you're asking me as someone who comes from a marriage blessed by the Messiah, is that a little different?
Here,
Yeah, it would be
if
different.
it's true, then yes.
Here's what's really funny is that I've seen other things where it's almost like other interviews where it's like, oh, this is kind of racist, or this superiority complex of being a blessed child and being born without original sin and all that stuff. It's like, all right, what do you think about the Israelites with Moses back then? They were the chosen people. Okay, well, so are you gonna?
So you're gonna
go
get on the
crazy?
Israelites for being the chosen
for
people?
being the chosen
You
people.
think you're so much better than
wait
the
a minute,
Philistines?
but then once Jesus, right? Once Jesus has resurrected and God has given the blessings to the Gentiles, and they are now becoming new creatures. Oh wait, now we should rip on them, right? Like, oh, these new creatures, so-called Christians, are now, these racist superiority, right? No, it's coming off of that spirit of what the Israelites have been through. When the sojourners came with the Israelites, sojourners mean like strangers, right? God told Moses to tell his people, treat them equally as you treat the Israelites. And the same thing with Christianity, how, right, just John 3:16, that when Jesus, right, when God loved his son so much that he gave up his only begotten son to save the whole world. It's like, that's the heart where we're coming from. It's not like this Nazi Hitler Aryan race superiority complex kind of thing. So I honestly, I think parents somehow raise their kids to almost think like that. And kids are just like, what? Like, I'm like this superior race, I have to look down. It's like, no, that's not it. That's not the heart and the spirit of it.
Yeah, I mean, from a young age, I always knew intuitively that something was pretty off about the church. I was always questioning everything. So when I was told that I was like born without this original sin, and that I was sort of just, they really exalted like, oh, the blessed children. We would even like, our parents would have to bow to us. There was a lot of bowing and a lot of...
Oh my gosh. Okay, what are you thinking?
This is something that's factually incorrect. So before we were just disagreeing kind of about opinions and stuff. This is something that's just factually incorrect. I don't know what she's talking about. Parents bowing to children.
Maybe they did it.
Okay, so I think what she's referring to is something that we used to do a lot, especially when I was growing up, called the family pledge, which is a ceremony you do with your family where you have this pledge that you read together as a family, and then afterwards you bow. But the bows that we did, that to my understanding, was first we all bow as a family to God and to our true parents.
Sure.
Then the parents would bow to one another.
Okay.
And then the children would bow to the parents.
Right.
So that's where bowing happens. I don't know if she was in a family where the parents would bow to the children, but that did not happen in my family. Or
that didn't happen either. It was the same with our family.
So,
like, if anything I could maybe recall, it's like my parents gave us like a half bow while we did like a full bow.
Yeah.
Because, parents, they represent God, and obviously they're not perfect. But
in the family,
it's
they
out
represent
of, it's
God.
out of, right, but it's out of the respect of God. I respect that you gave me these parents, so I want to show that respect to you through bowing to my parents, right? But so I think my parents maybe like half bow, just like, thank you, child. It's
more
not,
just like acknowledging the children,
yeah,
but it's not
like,
it's not them bowing to us.
right. It's not this like reverence, this worship. It's not like that.
She's trying to portray it like it's this weird dynamic where we're portrayed as these perfect beings and the parents
Like these gods.
Yeah, we're these gods and the parents bow to the gods. I don't know. Maybe her experience was different,
dude, it
but
probably
mine
was,
But
maybe.
mine, it was, it's the children respect the parents.
Right, exactly.
Right, so I don't know. And also, we're not perfect. She keeps saying they're these perfect children. I was never told I was perfect. I was never told that my siblings or my friends were perfect. We were just, it's about original sin, removing original sin, which is something we should be trying to do.
Right.
The concept of original sin is not a uniquely...
Says that in the Bible, redemption of our bodies. That's the goal.
We didn't come up with the idea of original sin, right?
No, we didn't.
Right? So
No.
trying to get rid of original sin should be a logical goal.
Oh, and just to clarify, in the DP or in our religion, there's 4 kinds of sin. There's original, ancestral, collective, and personal. So just because you no longer have original sin doesn't mean you don't have the other 3 sins.
Right,
So,
exactly. Right.
And it doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you also don't go through your own growing period.
Right.
And it doesn't mean you're
And
not going to sin along the
challenges
way.
and- right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Keep going.
A lot of I guess Asian tradition, because Moon's from Korea, and even their their holy land is in Korea. So being kind of exalted and having this pressure put on you and saying like you are God's hope for the world, but then you look around, you look at your family, you look at other, they call them blessed families, right? And you seeing how messed up and dysfunctional it is, it just didn't make sense.
And that's what's
Okay. Again, she's missing the point. She keeps saying like, "Oh, because we weren't perfect, then therefore the church is flawed." Like, what church has perfect people?
Yeah.
Like, that's the purpose of religion, is dealing with imperfect people
There you
to help
go.
them connect with God. And so our theology, I mean, I don't know how much of the theology they're going to cover in this video, and I guess we'll touch on it as we go along. But big part is we've had 6,000 years of fallen human history,
Right.
of just purely sinful people for thousands of years, and God is desperately trying to save us.
Right.
Okay? And she's like, well, Reverend Moon came, he blessed some couples in marriage, and they're not perfect people, so obviously he's not the Messiah. What are you talking about? Just because we're blessed in marriage doesn't mean we're all going to become perfect right away.
Look, Mira, when Jesus chose his disciples, Judas was not perfect. He betrayed. I guess Jesus ain't the Messiah, man, because that guy.
I don't know about that guy.
Oh man, that Judas, man, for 30 shekels, man. Oh boy, howdy.
That's a good point.
I mean, Jesus should have perfect people around him. I mean, if he was gonna, come on, Jesus. I mean, they slept on him at.
They did?
at Mount Gethsemane.
I think they did twice.
Right. Oh my God. I mean, they should have stayed up. They should have had such bodies to just not need sleep because they're just with Jesus. Anyway, what do you expect?
What can you expect?
All right.
sinless looks like. This is your idea of sinless.
Right.
Is all this dysfunction. It's like you have to change the definition of what sin even is.
Yeah.
Like to try
Yeah.
to function.
How did that work, like growing up in church? How was there like counseling or anything like that? Like saying that there's, issues going on in your life or even having to address sin issues. Like how do you think about your own thoughts in that sense when you're growing up? It's like, well, I'm supposed to be sinless, but I'm having these thoughts that I know are sinful.
Right.
Like how does counseling work in the Unification Church with the blessed children?
I wouldn't even really say that there's any proper counseling. I think that's why, unfortunately, so many people come out of cults and Unification Church with just so much mental health. And that was me, too, before I came to Christ, or he came to me, But, the really sad thing about it is that they would preach repentance and they would preach sin, but they never offered grace and forgiveness. And so you're in this constant cycle of like, okay, so I'm told that I'm, I don't have this original sin, that I'm God's hope for the world, yet I'm thinking things I shouldn't think, and why am I so messed up, right? And then I'm just basically trying to chase my tail, and they talk about indemnity. So you have to, and paying indulgences, or you might have issues from, some ancestor committed this sin. So you have to go restore and liberate your ancestors, and that's a whole other thing.
So all this extra unnecessary guilt just out of kind of nowhere.
Yeah, so you're just kind of like in this muck.
Okay, so we were discussing this earlier. So they're criticizing the idea of ancestral sin and being connected to the sins of your ancestors. I thought you gave a pretty good explanation of it. Really, did you want to mention
What?
it? Where you said how an idea behind it is if you had an ancestor who had something that they struggled with, a sin that they struggled with in their life. It's like they say they were an alcoholic or something. They had some struggle that they could not overcome in their lifetime. And then you, as their descendant, God will challenge you with the same temptation and the same obstacle. And then if you, as their descendant, are able to overcome it, then in a sense you are able to help them in the spirit world overcome it as well.
Yeah, so I guess that's the concept of returning resurrection, where, once you enter the spirit world, is there any more growth? Like, how does your spirit continue to grow? I guess that's our church's way of viewing it, but I guess she jumped in between a lot of different topics.
Well, I want to go to the counseling.
Yeah.
But you guys brought up ancestral sin. As you guys bring up ancestral sin, I want to bring up a quote that actually supports that from the Bible. Yeah. So what more do you guys want to bring up about ancestral sin?
So also they really emphasize guilt, like, they're just trying to make you feel guilty, when that's not the point. The point of overcoming sin is like, they don't provide a path for overcoming sin. We're not just about being sinful and not trying to overcome it. The church very much tries to guide people and does provide counseling. I don't know. I had a lot of counselors growing up. I don't know where she said we're completely devoid of counselors, but pushing you to work harder and to become a better, mature person. But the point of sin, ancestral sin, isn't about feeling guilty and weighing yourself down with the sins of your ancestors. It's about feeling connected to your ancestors and being inspired to, if I can overcome these challenging situations, that will help not only my own growth, but will also help my ancestors. And so just the idea of you being connected with your ancestors is also not a uniquely us thing. There are a lot of religions that venerate your ancestors.
That's venerate. We don't venerate. Venerate.
What does venerate mean? Does venerate
like exactly. Venerate. That's something that we're not.
Okay, so
taught.
not worshiping your ancestors,
exactly.
but just honoring your ancestors
right.
and acknowledging them
right.
and feeling you are connected. They are your family. You feel connected to your parents. Why not feel connected to their parents? So, and again, the point isn't about feeling guilty about them. It's about trying to overcome and help them.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the quote.
Yeah.
Where it says that the sins of the father is passed down to the son.
Oh, okay.
And man, I'm trying.
Do you want us to?
I'm trying to find. Huh?
Do you want to continue while you look for the quote, or?
Yeah, sure. But yeah, with the counseling too. Honestly, your primary counselors should also be your parents. That should be the first counselor. So, I personally do feel bad for her, because I don't think, and I don't want to rip on her parents. I don't want this to be too personal. And it's not only her. It has been other second gen where, here's the thing, where a lot of parents gave their children up to the altar of church and expected church to do everything.
Church to raise them.
And that was a huge problem.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of parents that didn't take that responsibility to counsel their kids. And that's why, now I know there's a lot of second gen who, you could say, left, a lot of them are seeking therapy. And it's like I'm not saying therapy is exactly bad, but that should have been reconciled with your parents as you're growing up. It shouldn't be with a whole nother stranger that you pay to.
That you pay, right?
Right.
Yeah, and and I had, your ultimate counselor should be your parents, but also STF was a big program a lot of us did. It was like a traveling missionary / fundraising / self-development kind of training course. And in there you have captains, you have counselors, you have commanders, they counsel you as well. We would have workshops a lot, like summer camps. Then you had captains of your teams, and they would help counsel you. There were marriage counselors. Maybe she didn't, but I had a lot of counselors available for me growing up. What about you? Did you?
Yeah, I did. And just, maybe in the community that she grew up in, maybe there weren't too many counselors.
So let me read this.
Oh, you
so
found
this,
it?
This is in Exodus chapter 34-7. Keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, and that will be no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the father's iniquity, again meaning sin, impurity, of the fathers upon the children, and upon the children's children, and unto the third and unto the fourth generation. So, this is something that people would have to deal with. And, I understand, I would understand if people would say, oh, yeah, but Jesus cleared all that. Jesus, right? But here's the thing. even though people are saved by faith, that's something that Jesus can't. Now Jesus could cover those for those sins, especially when you die and you go to heaven. But at the time when you're alive, you do have to deal with these sins. Why? What's the logic? Think about Abraham. Abraham was saved, but his son Isaac had to deal with his sins. Isaac was a saved person, but Jacob had to deal with these. So it's like, even though they may be saved, right? Still, you have to deal with your ancestors' sin. Even if you're a saved person, if your father was a drunkard, maybe you have to deal with alcohol too, and you have to redeem that by your father, right? So that's, so again, this isn't venerating or worshiping your ancestors, is right, acknowledging them, respect, and in a way trying to liberate them from that action through bettering your life.
Yeah, and we had this question earlier. I mean, in Christianity, it's a lot about, personal salvation. Is there any discussion about, like, ancestral salvation? Like, what about the people who were born before Jesus came to this earth? Is there no chance for them to be saved? Like, I don't know how they view it.
That's something good. Like, I'm not sure if this is something to talk about now. That I think
that's a whole
right now.
That could be a whole.
We kind of brought that point up. And we're
Right.
like, we have
But
no idea.
no, there is a Bible quote on that.
Yeah.
I forgot it. It says in Divine Principle quoted. I could try to find that along the way
I feel
if
like
you want.
that's an important question, but I think it's going deeper than I think we want
Okay.
to right now.
Okay.
But it's definitely something to consider. And then also, ancestral sin. What is original sin?
Right.
Original sin is ancestral sin. It's the ancestral sin of the original ancestors. Okay, it's just the ultimate ancestral. So anyone who believes in original sin, de facto also believes in ancestral sin. So don't make fun of the idea of ancestral sin if you were someone who believes in original sin.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Which I'm assuming they do.
There you go. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 15 when it compares Adam and Jesus, saying that the sins of Adam is carried on to all of mankind. Anyway. All right, let's go.
Like a mire of guilt and shame, and just basically, trying to compensate and make up for just where you fall short. So they do these things called, I would say, like indulgences or just paying indemnity for the sins that you paid, rather than looking for Christ. That was, everything was paid for on the cross. You're trying to just pay for those things yourself.
See, that's the thing. Like, when you just expect Christ to save you, that develops the entitlement of, I can just sin. I can just do whatever I want then. Which I'm sure they don't advocate for that, obviously. But subconsciously, people will get tempted by that thought, by that foolish thought. Oh, since Jesus, saved me, then once temptation creeps up, it's like they don't have the strength to challenge themselves anymore. It's just like, I'm saved by Jesus, and then they just screw up, right? So.
And then another thing she points out is, again, they really emphasize this being in this mire of guilt and shame. And I'm sorry if that's something she dealt with. I was never.
Right, personally, that's what she probably went
I was
through,
never
right.
encouraged to be shameful and guilty.
Yeah.
Like, that was not a thing that was taught that you should feel. And when it comes to sin, God and Satan have different perspectives when it comes to your sin. God sees your sin and says, I love you unconditionally. You made a mistake, but you can do better. I believe in you. That's God's attitude.
Right.
Satan's attitude is, look what you did.
Yeah, he just
You're
gets right
evil.
there.
You're dirty. That's who you really are.
Right,
That's
right.
how you. So this feeling of guilt and shame she keeps bringing up. That's satanic. That's what Satan wants you to feel.
Right.
So to criticize the church because of something Satan does, is weird to me.
Yeah, I could understand from her point, though, of corrupt leaders taking advantage of that, of people. I could understand that. Again, like, that's the sad thing, that parents give their children up to the altar, or give themselves up to the altar of church, of church, leaders that, may have not been exactly very well-meaning, at their time. So that, but yeah, as far as our theology goes, that's not the attitude. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, like we're not saying the church is perfect
The
by
church
any
is
stretch,
not perfect.
by any
Yeah,
stretch of the
we're not-
imagination. From the members all the way to leaders in the movement. Like people could be imperfect, people could even be corrupt, but that's true for really all churches. And it's not something to say that necessarily that the founders de facto not telling the truth. It's something that everyone needs to work on themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
What takes place during those ceremonies. So people.
Your ancestors' guilt upon you.
What was that?
You have your ancestors' guilt kind of upon you that you have to help
Yeah, they
pay
call
off
it-
as well.
Yeah, they call it hereditary sin. So, so in Korea, they have a place called Cheongpyeong, and it's sort of like this marble city all dedicated to Unification Church members, and a lot of them like flock throughout the year. It's all built upon really sort of ancestral veneration or ancestral worship. So people go to these, they have these massive halls where you sit in rows, very organized rows, and you have these Korean leaders just kind of walking around, and you have a stage of people singing and dancing to a very system.
Just real quick, we don't worship our ancestors. She said worship.
Did she say that?
Yeah, she said it again. We don't worship our ancestors.
Dramatic beat, and you're hitting actually parts of your body to liberate yourself of maybe evil spirits or and then
Asceticism. Yeah.
Seriously.
and just so they worship ancestors, they talk to the dead,
All those good things.
Talk to the dead.
Yeah, and then So also, what I was
Well,
curious.
there was I could recall that there was a time when my dad lived during this time. I think it was in the 80s or early 90s. It was something called channeling. So channeling is when people would open themselves up for spirit world to communicate to them, and they just basically regurgitate what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. I don't think that's a great thing to.
No, exactly. So that was happening, but then there was bad fruits that was coming out of that. So when that got to Father, and Father was hearing about it, he's like, "Yeah, you guys gotta shut that down. Like this isn't good. Like people are like thinking like
He was not encouraging.
He was not encouraging it. Yeah, the whole channeling thing. So, I mean that's the thing. It's like you're not mature enough to open yourself up to a certain type of spirit world. That's why we should have faith in the Holy Spirit, not faith in just talking to any type of spirit.
Any spirit who'll talk to you.
Right, exactly, right. Okay, yeah, that's bad.
I mean, in your outline, you had talked about
We agree that talking to spirits like Ouija board, voodoo, witchcraft is not something that we're about.
That's definitely.
If you're trying to say that we're all about that, that's not accurate.
Right.
being someone who's second generation.
Yeah.
You essentially, because a lot of this has to do with lineage.
Right.
It's about, and also it's very generational focused. There's a big family aspect, a generational aspect to it. But you had written down that second generation, that you're viewed as pure and in God's lineage, and so your parents in first generation, they were in Satan's lineage prior to Sun Young Moon.
Prior to like the marriage ceremony.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, but even though you're viewed as you would be one of the people in second generation who's viewed as a blessed child, but they would say you still have 5% responsibility.
Yes.
But God said 95%, and you have to do the 5%.
Right.
So what does that 5% look like?
That would include like getting matched and going to the holy marriage ceremony. Having children. If I had children, say if I was born or I was married to another second generation, and then had children, they would be like third generation. That's just kind of like advancing the kingdom in their eyes. And be reading all of Moon's speeches. And they have different rituals and things they do. Like they have something called hundoke. They use a lot of Korean language. So we would be reciting pledges in Korean at like 5 a.m., a lot of bowing, different things like that. But I would say the biggest thing was revolved around the holy marriage ceremony.
What do you want to say?
Okay, I don't know if she's purposely trying to skip this, but one of the core central teachings is the concept of the three blessings, which we didn't make up. It comes from Genesis. Be fruitful, multiply, have dominion. So she's just talking about being multiplying, which is obviously referring to having a God-centered family and having children, which is an important point. But she's making it out to seem like, oh, you had kids now, you had children now, grow up, and just you need to have more kids. Your job is to make more kids. Like that's like what the church is about. You're skipping the first blessing. The first blessing is being fruitful, developing yourself, having your own personal relationship with God, becoming a mature person. And then once you have achieved that and have a certain level of maturity, then you can enter a marriage and have children. But she's just like, they just want you to be baby machines and just pump out kids.
Nothing's wrong with being baby machines, but it makes us sound like human trafficking or something.
Right.
It's like, you know.
And like, I'm assuming she's not against the idea of having a family. And that's not, obviously, I don't think that's what she's saying, but it's just like she's trying to portray the church in a weird light. And yeah, we do read Sun Myung Moon's speeches and his words. We also read the Bible. Like, do Christians not read the Bible? Like, is it weird that we read what we see as God's word, as God's guidance to us? Is that a strange topic? Like, that's not all, but it's not like you just read the words and therefore you've done your 5%, you're a perfect person now. Okay, reading the words teaches you, but then you got to live it. You got to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
The Bible says, be ye doers of the word.
Right, exactly.
Doers of the word.
Exactly.
And then, I mean, again, we're not about like works salvation, but the thing is, when you're saved and you're right because by faith, the thing is, naturally by that faith, you want to do good works. Your conscience is telling you to want to do good works. So you're not expected to be perfect, obviously, but you have to do good works. People that say that they're saved and they just continuously do bad things, it's like, I mean, I'm not gonna, obviously I'm not gonna judge you because that's God's job, but it's like, I could at least assume, like where's your life at, man? I did find that quote, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Right? So it says in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 39 to 40, regarding the Israelites, right, from the past, and now the new creatures, hence Christians, right, who received the promise. So it says, of whom the world was not worthy, talking about the Israelites in the past, they wandered in the deserts and in mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. And these all have obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise. So meaning that they had the faith in them, but they didn't receive the promise, the spiritual salvation per se, what Jesus has offered up on the cross, right? So they had the faith, they're ready for it. If Jesus was there at the time, they would have received it, but they didn't. But obviously Jesus was not there at the time, so they didn't receive the promise. So God, having provided some better thing for us, that they, without us, should not be made perfect. Meaning that we could actually help them to be made perfect by us receiving the promise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that does support.
That does support that we're helping ancestors.
Yeah, and where
to
is that?
receive the promise. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 39 to 40.
Okay.
Right.
And I do want to address the point she spoke about Champyong. And I guess that's kind of a big can of worms there, but but Reverend Moon did I guess bless that ministry for a time.
For a time
period, but then closer to his passing, he showed, I guess, ill will towards it, or not. He no longer gave his approval, and I think maybe there's a certain time for people to go to a place, almost like as a retreat, to, I guess, to rededicate themselves to God and to Christ. And I mean, there was a lot of I guess they called it onsu, where you like hitting yourself. But I mean, I've seen that in Christianity too, where they've hit themselves.
Wasn't that asceticism what they were talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they mentioned says.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not sure. Should we mention that? I guess Sanctuary Church now has a different perspective of ancestral liberation. That's no longer an indulgences thing, where it's like.
Yeah,
I thought we still did ancestral liberation.
Yeah, but
No,
it's
we
not
do,
like at the pay.
but it's not like it's you could donate whatever your heart
really?
is intent, right? Yeah, you know how I was raised with my family, and I don't want to bash too much on Champyong, although it did become corrupt later on.
Yes.
That's
a whole
fact.
other thing.
And the person who was running it, Hyunam Kim,
Basically, it
she
became a
showed
racket.
herself to be a betrayer in the end. I like my dad's view. Me and my family never went to Champyong. Besides, I think my mom did. But like I like my dad's attitude where he was like, we don't need to go to some place to redeem our ancestors. We have to just live a principled life. I like that approach. And again, it's by the family, right? It's not putting ourselves in the altar of church, right? Or in the altars of Champyong, just rely Champyong to just redeem everything of ourselves. Which, that's the bad attitude that some people did to themselves when they went to Champyong. And that's on them.
Yeah, so I did go to Champyong once.
Yeah.
And I would describe my experience as it was definitely a time of reflection and prayer. It wasn't just, you're going to these sessions where you're hitting like yourself, but you'd wake up early in the morning, you walk up the mountain, like you're not really talking to people, you're kind of praying while you're walking up the mountain, and then then you walk back down. So it was kind of I would say it's a spiritual retreat. That's how I took it as.
Right,
but
yeah.
I guess we can admit that it definitely got corrupted, and the perspective of Sanctuary Church now is that you don't need to pay a certain amount in order to liberate your ancestors. That can be done just through the grace of Christ. Yeah, I mean, I think she has a good point in that maybe that wasn't the best thing. So maybe there's a time for it and a reason for it, but now there's not really a reason for it to continue the way it is.
And we have to point out that there were church leaders who used indulgence type arguments to
Right.
basically
Yeah.
run rackets and steal money from people. That was something that did happen. But again, that was not Sun Myung Moon who told them to do that, obviously.
Right.
That was people who were corrupt, worked their way up the system and used their position. And again,
Don't expect church to be
we're a world
perfect,
full of fallen people. People
Don't-
are not immune to
yeah.
temptation. Money is a strong temptation for a lot of people.
Right.
So I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen. That did happen.
Right.
But again, people who follow Christ aren't perfect.
Very unique that see it as almost as sort of like a holy pilgrimage. In many ways in Islam, they would see that doing their pilgrimage to Mecca
Right.
is something that's very unique for them. But just tell them just a little bit about that as well too.
Yeah, so going to Korea and to their holy land, that's not like a requirement, but it's definitely it's encouraged, especially if people are dealing with certain sins that are unexplainable. They'll say, well, it's probably because of some ancestor, did this sin, or some medium will tell them, you should go to Korea and do all these rituals and stuff like that. That's sort of their.
You guys remember having a lot of mediums telling you what to do?
Nope.
What is she talking about?
This might be I don't know what she experienced, but there were freaky things that did happen amongst first gen. So I do recall, I think my dad came across mediums. Not exactly like asking them for advice, but I think there were like mediums. Again, I think eventually I was just like, let's not do this. Because I mean, I haven't seen that in my life. There's like personal people who are like so-called spiritual, but people didn't really hang around with them. Yeah.
Reverend Moon did not encourage the use of mediums to help you overcome sin.
There you go.
Their way of just, I guess, what did I say? Just, yeah, I'm kind of blanking right now.
So, I have a question. I'm just really, really curious. If, as a second generation unification member, like the perfect child, you're sinless, why do you have 5% of your salvation left to earn if you're already sinless?
So they believe that second generation are born without the original sin. So
so you can still commit actual sins and then...
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, you can still have other sins. And the original sin is based on the foundation that... So were you able to research anything about the fall? Like what their belief is or what the fall of Adam and Eve was?
I did, and that was insane.
Right.
I never even heard anything like that.
Yeah, Drew, do me a favor. Tell me, when you looked into that, tell me, what did you find out about that?
Yeah, so there is, well, correct me, because
Yeah.
you have been in this way longer than I have, which has been for just a number of hours,
Yeah.
but unlike in Scripture, Romans chapter 5 speaks abundantly, clearly to the fact that Adam sinned, and we all fell in Adam, and that there are two different representative heads of all of humanity. And either you're in Adam and you're condemned, or you're in Christ and you have the free gift of justification and life, eternal life. When Adam sinned, according to Scripture in Genesis 3, everyone fell into sin with him, and all of his descendants are now sinners. Like so many theologians have said, we're not sinners because we commit acts of sin, but we commit acts of sin, we sin because we're sinners by nature. The understanding, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, of the fall according to Sun Myung Moon is that Eve had sex with Satan,
Yes.
and then she had this kind of original sin from Satan himself, and then she passed that sin on from herself to Adam
Right.
by subsequently having sex with Adam, and then all the stain of original sin came down the line through sex because of that original unholy union of Satan with Eve, and then every subsequent sexual union that took place in every other person born after them has this mark of Satan as a result of that. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why they focus so much around the marriage ceremony and having like a pure blood lineage. And if you actually go back in Dr. Walter Martin's book, he talks about like in the early church when Reverend Moon started the church, he would do these things called blood cleansing. And
I read about that. That made my blood boil. I'll be honest.
Yeah, for anyone, just can you explain to them, just so the audience can get context too, what was that? What was blood cleansing like during the early days of the Unification Church?
Yeah, so because Moon was seen as someone that was sinless, a lot of the women in the early church, and he later got a lot of accusation from like the authorities and stuff in Korea, but he would have sex with a lot of the younger members, women. I think some of them were married or just women in the church, and in that way he was able to purify their blood lineage, and then of course that woman would be with her husband, and that way that their whole
then their family would subsequently be cleansed.
Yeah,
that is disgusting. That is evil.
Okay, so there's a couple things here. There's the fall, which we should get into.
Yeah.